Happy Thursday, everyone. So we're going to do a quick check-in with the New York Times White House correspondent Maggie Haberman, one of the smartest and most seasoned White House correspondents out there. We're going to talk to Maggie about the latest. Hi, everyone. I'm going to give everyone a chance to join. I'm going to be talking with Maggie Haberman to get the very latest on, hi everyone, on Joe Biden and whether he's staying in the race. Also tonight at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, Donald Trump will be giving what we hear is a 90-minute speech. According to reports, he has rewritten the speech he had intended to give after the assassination attempt last Saturday in Pennsylvania. He apparently decided to change the tone of his speech. We'll see if that tone is different and more conciliatory and more unifying. The Republican National Convention has been going on all week. So here, let me find Maggie for us, everyone. Maggie.
Hi. This is going to be.
How are you?
I'm good. This will be better than our last time when I was on a street corner. Hopefully.
Oh, that's okay. Actually, I like the ambiance of the last Instagram live that we did right after Donald Trump was convicted, which really seemed to help him more than hurt him, at least with his followers, right, Maggie?
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, it became a rallying cry for his supporters in polling, although this race is so hardened that there was not some huge bump for him. Where it really helped him was fundraising. They raised a ton of money, and what had been one of President Biden's advantages for the fall was fundraising. And that's just really not the case right now, both because of what Trump has been doing, but also since the debate, the president's fundraising has fallen off, at least from large donors, precipitously.
Yes, and we're going to talk. We'll talk about former President Trump's speech tonight in Milwaukee. But first, let's talk about Joe Biden, because the news attention seems to be focused back to President Biden. According to the New York Times, several people close to him say he has begun to accept the idea, Maggie, that he may not be able to win in November. He may have to drop out of the race. Can you tell us sort of the latest and some of the conversations that President Biden has been having?
Sure. So that is the reporting that I have, that my colleagues have, is that the president has been pushed by a number of senior officials in his party. There has been a parade of leaders who have gone to him. We had Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader, go speak to him. Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, went to go see him in Delaware last weekend. Nancy Pelosi, the former House Speaker, who just has enormous clout with her members still, has been much more emphatic and was clear with President Biden that she thinks that the numbers in the polling is just terrible for him, terrible for House members. And so the president has been hearing all of that, along with the fact that the fundraising for his campaign has dropped precipitously. My colleague Reed Epstein and I actually just posted a story that for the month of July, his campaign is on track. Now it could change if he gets out and there's a change in the ticket, depending on the structure of the campaign. But for July, they're on track to raise roughly half, and that would be the high end, from large donors of what they raised in June. In June, they raised about $50 million from large donors who can write a check of almost up to $1 million. That's not what's happening here. These folks are going to be lucky if they can raise about 25 million. Now, the campaign says, they always expected some drop off. They did not expect this much of a drop off from high dollar donors. And it's all just the aftermath of the debate. How long any decision from President Biden might take, it is known to him and a small handful of people. Katie, people forget that President Biden generally does not make decisions quickly, but he may be at the end of his decision-making process. I think the big push on this came last weekend.
And in fact, Axios is reporting that a decision could be made as soon as this weekend.
I think that's correct. Usually, what the president does is he confers with family after he holds, other conversations with outside allies. It has become abundantly clear to him that people are not going to hold back, and that people have been as respectful in leadership, Democratic leadership, and senior ranks of Democrats have been as respectful as they felt like they could be. Last weekend, he had a series of calls with groups of House caucus members, And those calls did not go
That's
well. There were efforts
I heard. I
yeah,
heard that, you know, that he was not really conveying a vision, that
yep.
he wasn't super clear on
Hmm.
in terms of the things he was saying. Is that
Hmm.
what you understand to be the case too?
And defiant and telling people that he doesn't believe the polls are bad. He doesn't believe things are bad. He got into a fight with one House member, audio of which leaked, I think, to Puck, where
Was
he
that Jason
Jason
Crow?
Crow. It was name me a foreign policy president more respected by world leaders. It's not a conversation has been the complaint that House members are making. He's not been really receptive to the criticism. In fact, he's just rejected the premise of what they're saying. And so they have been frustrated, and that has not helped him.
You know, it's interesting, Maggie, because it felt like there was this clarion call after the debate.
Mm-hmm.
And then it seemed, at least to me, an outsider, that things
Mm-hmm.
were kind of quieting down
Mm-hmm.
and that people were giving him a chance to rehabilitate his image following the debate. Was the sense that people just didn't feel like he came back strong enough to mitigate the damage that was done in
I
Atlanta?
think there were two things going on. There was a group of people that was still hoping to hear what's the plan, what's your path forward. That included Democratic governors who met with the president at the White House and also by Zoom in the same meeting on July 3rd, right before the holiday. And the message that they got back was, I'm in it. And that basically chilled conversation. And that, I was exhausted and I need to get more rest. And that did not reassure a number of them. He was not doing a ton of outreach. You compare it to other times when elected officials have been in crises, they really work the phones. Biden was very slow working the phones. So that was part of the frustration, is there were people who were open to moving ahead and they just wanted to hear from him, and they didn't. And then there's a group of people that just felt like we can't unsee what we saw at the debate. And I have heard people say this privately. Again, not some are saying it publicly, most are not. I think more will start to, but the feeling was this isn't going to get better. This was as bad a debate performance on live television as almost anyone I could talk to in the Democratic Party could remember. And they didn't think the follow-up interviews did much to address it.
Meanwhile, President Obama, someone was quoted in a piece today saying the silence has been deafening. What have you heard about where he stands or his involvement in the whole thought process that President Biden and his team are going through right now?
Obama, sorry, my phone inconveniently rings on
That's
Instagram.
okay. That's
The
okay.
President Obama, like almost every other Democrat, is concerned. And he is looking at the same polling that everybody else is. He has a unique relationship with President Biden. Biden was his vice president. He's very attuned to Biden's emotions. They actually are very close. They have an unusual level of bond. There's also Biden's feeling that he got passed over, in 2016. And Obama had told him he didn't think he should run. And Biden, I think, has some, I don't think, I know, has some sense of chip on his shoulder. Sounds derisive, and I don't mean it that way, but he feels like he's been underestimated a lot, and this has driven him for decades and decades and decades. And I think Obama has been trying to hang back and sort of let Biden get there on his own while having conversations with other members of the party, like Nancy Pelosi. But Obama talks to a lot of these officials all the time. I don't think these are conversations that just sprang up because of the debate. I think they did take on a different patina because of the debate.
There's something sort of sad about all of this, Maggie, in terms of the push and pull. And do you think that if, in fact, President Biden does step aside, do you think he'll be able to do so with a certain modicum of grace? And, or do you think there still is going to be a lot of resentment towards him that this decision wasn't made earlier in the process?
If he does step aside, I think that kind of a reaction will depend on whether Democrats face a lot of losses in November, right? I mean, there's a Democrat who I've been corresponding with for months now about this, as people were not wanting to talk publicly. And I made the point to this person that Biden is upset that he's not getting credit. And that's just he's made that very plain in his own words, that he feels he has a record that should be rewarded with another term. He hasn't really said what he would do with a second term. But he feels that he has a record that should be rewarded. And this person said he'll get a lot of credit if he loses. And that, I think, is ultimately what we're talking about. I think that it's so late in the game that Democrats are not hugely optimistic about what the next 3 months could look like, but they do think that it could look much better with a new candidate. And they also think that Trump comes with historic flaws, historic weaknesses. He's the first ever major party nominee with a criminal conviction. The echoes of January 6, 2021 still exist. And so I think there will still be some frustration if Democrats end up with a lot of losses on election night.
Having said that, to your point, I think they believe, or some Democrats, is my understanding, believe that if there is a different candidate, they will be able to make a more effective case against President Trump. I mean, part of the problem is that, everyone sort of holds their breath when President Biden is out speaking or doing an interview or a press conference. And so as a result, as he said, probably a bad choice of words, given it was before this assassination attempt on Saturday, that they needed to put Donald Trump in the bullseye. And what he meant is they needed to bring back focus to Donald Trump. But as long as Joe Biden is in the race, it seems like that's going to be difficult to do, right?
Yeah, you just summed up the dilemma that Democrats find themselves in, and that they're pretty blunt about. That they don't want the race to be about Joe Biden. Joe Biden is historically unpopular for a Democratic president. Part of Joe Biden's frustration is that he's not more popular because he thinks his policies should make him more popular. But
why do you think he is so unpopular? Is it because of things like inflation and pocketbook issues or immigration issues that people feel he has not been tuned into as much as he should have been?
Those are certainly, I think, top lines. I think there are some, for lack of a better way of putting it, vibes answers on this, which is, and I don't think there's ever really been a deep dive on this, but I think so much of this Trump amnesia phenomenon that we talk about and the pollsters talk about is that the last time people really felt good about their lives was pre-pandemic, and that was 2019. And I don't know that we can quantify that. I don't think anyone has properly quantified that. People, and polling all shows this, people are very angry post-pandemic. And strategists in both parties have had trouble matching up the cause of the anger with the levels of it, right? Mm-hmm. So because inflation does remain high, prices are high, and they just are. And so I think that the sense is that the president has not offered enough of a consistent message about it. I also think that Americans, these things just come down to basic levels. I think people like seeing their president. And I think that people got used to seeing a president out there in Trump constantly, whether he was physically out there or tweeting, which just gave the sense of motion. But he has given very few press conferences comparatively.
No interviews,
doesn't keep a rigorous schedule. I think the public likes to connect with the president, even if they want to connect angrily, right? Mm-hmm. Even if they want to reuse and gnash their teeth and point fingers and curse, people like to connect with their presidents and feel like they are seeing them.
That's so interesting. So the effort by his team or staff to, in a way, cloister mm-hmm. him or protect him and not, mm-hmm. I guess, to avoid having him say embarrassing things or not be as strong or appear as strong as they would like him to appear, actually have the opposite effect.
I think so. And I think that, I wonder, Katie, after the last couple of weeks, I had always heard his handlers don't want him to do more because they're afraid of gaffes. But the President Biden we're seeing in the last couple of months, and I should note that this is all taking place with the backdrop of his son being convicted, which I think on a gun charge, which I think has taken an enormous toll on him. He has not seemed up to it. And that has been the concern that Democrats have been voicing for a little bit now privately.
Mhm.
Now, you know, people have not wanted to talk about this. People have been afraid to talk about it because they don't want to be attacked or they don't want to be criticized. But, and by people, I mean Democrats. But and so people wouldn't discuss things on the record or any meaningful way. But there's, you know, there has been concerns for a while that he has seemed um, not vigorous. And so I don't know how much of this was that his team was holding him back or that there were things that just felt like too much.
Yeah. And was this sort of within the last year, the last 6 months? If you had to put a timetable on it, Maggie, when did people start to feel this
I,
way?
it's really the last several months that people are now saying is when they started seeing this.
Hmm.
You know, there are events that you can look at um, that he has clearly struggled. So one was an immigration event several days before the debate. Um, you know, he was, his voice was hard to hear. He was having trouble with his words. Um, you know, I was talking to someone who said to me after the debate that they had felt like they never said this to me before. They felt like they were getting less access to him over
Hmm.
time. And they felt like this explained why. Now, I don't know that it explains why, but there are plenty of Democrats who are going to come to that conclusion, whether it's true or not.
Let me ask you, I know I don't want to take all your time. You've got a busy night ahead. You're going to be watching President Trump deliver the speech. But before we talk about that, I have to ask you about potential replacements. What would happen if President Biden decides he's going to bow out of the race? Tell me how sort of the Kamala Harris of it all is playing out right now. And it must be very difficult for her to go about her day-to-day business. Yeah, and I know the New York Times has written about it by saying, quote, by making the case for himself publicly and privately, Mr. Biden has implicitly had to downplay her chances of winning. And in supporting him, Ms. Harris has been careful not to come across as focused on her own political future, even at a time when she appears to be finding her footing. And some polls show her faring just as well as, if not better, than Mr. Biden against Trump. Can you talk about the dynamics that are going on there?
Sure. So look, I mean, she is in a difficult position. She has always been in a difficult position in this White House. Remember, she was picked as the VP against the advice, according to the reporting from my former colleagues, Alex Burns and Jonathan Martin, against some of her own VP search committee. You know, he picked her because she had some connection to his late son, Beau, or at least that was one of the reasons. And, you know, she always had a portfolio that her allies felt was a no-win for her. It, you know, it was the border crisis. It was immigration. You will hear a lot about that if she is the party's standard bearer.
Because she was put in charge of immigration, but she'll correct you and say, actually, I was put in charge of the root
That's right.
causes of
That's
immigration.
right. That's right. And you will hear that going forward. It is not. It is very clear that her allies are going to make a pretty strong stand that it should be her if Biden gets out. And I think that you will see um, the CBC
Congressional
uh,
Black Caucus.
caucus push for that as well.
But even
Um,
Jim Clyburn said, that maybe there should be a mini primary. He had thrown that out, and he was really her main advocate when she was selected as vice president.
well, and true. You know, and there are going to be other people who are going to say there should be some kind of a mini primary or an open process or the appearance of an open process. And I suspect that that is something that President Biden is grappling with, is what that would look like and what to do there. I don't think this is going to be an open convention. I mean, that's the one thing that I would say I don't think is the case. I think there will be
Mm-hmm.
some effort to sort this out. There's not a lot of time. We're talking about a couple of weeks. There are a number of governors who I think are going to feel like they don't want to just hold their tongues and not say they're interested. That doesn't mean they will go ahead.
I guess,
Everyone may say,
if I were a governor and I was considering, or I had presidential ambitions, I might want to not touch this with a 10-foot pole, Maggie. I may want to
no,
okay, I'll wait till
yeah,
2028. Thank
no.
you.
There's a very good argument for that, which is a thanks, no thanks. This is a mess. You know, and that's, I think, why a lot of people think it will likely end up being Harris. But there are a number of senior Democrats who are not certain that it shouldn't be a governor and that it shouldn't be some other option. There is a lot of concern among Democrats, that a lot of Democrats who believe that a driving factor in rejecting Hillary Clinton by the electorate, and again, she did not, she lost the Electoral College, she didn't lose the popular vote, was sexism. And there is concern that that would be a factor.
And
I don't,
racism in
right.
Kamala Harris's
That's definitely true. So that's right. And so I don't know what that ends up looking like, but these are the discussions that are being had.
Yeah, that's a very sad statement, isn't it, in 2024, that would be the case. All right, let's talk briefly about JD Vance, because you wrote a very long piece in the New York Times today, an excellent piece, front page story, very well reported, about how kind of he forged this relationship after trashing Trump in 2016. I interviewed him several times, and he was not kind to President Trump at all. He had to basically go and, kiss the ring and apologize. And were you surprised that he picked JD Vance? And why do you think he picked him? And tell us a little bit about this courtship.
Sure. So I'm not surprised that he picked him. And I'll work backwards on your question. Donald Trump, I don't think that he thinks much of the job of the vice president at all. He certainly made that clear in terms of how he dealt with Mike Pence at the end, and at various points throughout his presidency. And so if you start with the idea that he doesn't really think this is a huge job in the first place, you look at the options. And Trump is a chemistry player. He tends to go by who he has the best personal interactions with. He has no chemistry with Marco Rubio, none, zero. And Rubio did things in that primary in 2016 that I think Trump just found hard to get past. He doesn't have much of a relationship with Burgum, and I don't think they ever entirely clicked.
And by the way, it turns out he wasn't a very dynamic speaker at the convention.
No, and so and Vance is a talented political performer. He just is. And so, it's the thing I was thinking about last night watching him was that there's something that Vance and Pence have in common, which is, Pence is an evangelical Reaganite. And so on policy, they could not be further away from one another. But Pence was a conservative radio host before he became a congressman. And Vance is somebody whose life story was turned into a Hollywood movie. And so there is this sort of touch of the dramatic with both of them, and showmanship. And I think Trump tends to gravitate toward, I know Trump tends to gravitate toward that. So I'm not surprised he picked Vance. And he waited up until literally the last possible second to do this. I mean, Vance was told of this less than a half an hour before Trump announced it. So this was, this was way up to the line, which is actually different than how it went with Pence. With Pence, he offered it to Pence, then pretended he hadn't, or at least hinted that he was going to give it to Pence, all but offered it, then started playing games with Chris Christie. And anyway, so it was a little different. But I'm not surprised. But Vance spent basically 2 years working on this relationship, 3 years working on this relationship. And it started with looking for neutralizing whatever hostility there might be when Vance was looking to run for the Senate in Ohio, and that worked. He ultimately got Trump's endorsement. And he sort of practiced the art of scarcity with Trump. He did not call him all the time. He did not seek out his favor all the time. There are lots of people who do that with Trump, and Trump tends to want people more when their backs are turned to him. And I think Vance was careful when he applied pressure. He also had support from a lot of key validators.
Like Don Jr. and Eric, right?
Well, Don Jr. especially. Don Jr. and Vance are friends, and a lot of Don Jr.'s ecosystem in the MAGA world either work for Vance or support Vance. He had Tucker Carlson. He had Elon Musk as a supportive voice. So all of this is where it ended up. Rupert Murdoch was working very hard to keep Vance from being the pick, very hard. At the end of the day, Trump has dominated Murdoch over the last 8 years and not the other way around. And so that's what's happening here again, too.
Who do you think that they're most fearful of if Joe Biden were to step aside? Are they, I know that Tim Alberta wrote that piece, huh?
I just asked you to ask that again because my phone did something.
Oh, sure. I was asking, who are they most afraid of on Team Trump? Tim Alberta wrote that piece that they're praying that Joe Biden doesn't bow out. So
well, that's true.
You know,
That is
who are they most worried about? Do you have any intel on that?
Yeah, I don't think that they have a specific person who they're most worried about right
Are
now.
you doing some reporting while we're talking?
Sorry, yeah, somebody was just saying me. It's been one of those days.
That's okay.
I don't think
I'm gonna let you go in 3 minutes, by the way.
no, we're all good. I don't think there's some particular person who they they worry about. Everybody comes with their own pluses and minuses, right? I mean, I think Newsom, they would love to run against because they think they can make a progressive case against him. Pritzker's a little harder for a lot of reasons.
What about Gretchen Whitmer?
Well, I think that Trump is okay running against a woman. I really do. But I think they are more worried about Kamala Harris than they are Joe Biden. They are aware, and a number of senior Democrats are too. Governors have really not been tested on the national stage the same way as Harris has. She's the vice president. She ran for president. It is just different. But the Trump team wants Biden. They are, they are beginning to look at so many people there didn't believe me when I said to them a week ago that this was not going to be sustainable with President Biden. He'll stay. He's never getting out. He's never getting out. He hasn't gotten out, but we'll see where it goes in the next couple of days.
So meanwhile, someone asked me, one of my followers, Maggie, can you share any more info about Donald Trump and RFK Jr.'s phone call that was leaked earlier this week? I heard someone tell me that he actually offered the vice presidency to RFK Jr. That's not true.
I don't think that's true, but I think they did have some discussions about whether RFK could be supportive and what that might look like. Trump has been sort of fascinated by RFK this whole race. He did talk about him for VP at one point previously. I do not believe he offered him the vice presidency. No. Even if he said something in a Donald Trump way of, would you ever want to do this? Ha ha. This is not a serious conversation. But he likes him, and Donald Trump likes celebrity, and he likes credentials, and even
Probably
with all
likes the Kennedy
I was about
name.
to say, even with all the things that Bobby Kennedy has said, he likes the name Kennedy.
All right. In closing, because I know you've got a lot to do.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
He's going to be. No. I totally understand. You're so great to give us this much time. I know that obviously the big speech is tonight. It's scheduled, I understand, to be 90 minutes. Tell us what you expect from President Trump tonight.
So I don't expect a quote unquote new tone, even though I think it might sound that way on the television set, because he has not been heard from since the assassination. I mean, in any meaningful way since the assassination attempt. My understanding is he absolutely recognizes the magnitude of what he just went through. Conveying that, I think, is a different thing. He does not like showing weakness, as we know. Hence, we saw him get up after his ear got shot and is pumping his fist. I expect there will be less, describing Biden as evil or Democrats as evil. But I think on policy, he will be quite critical. And then my question is, what does he say about the attempt on his life? And I imagine he will talk about it. I just don't know what that looks like.
And I'm curious, were you surprised when you watched that in Pennsylvania that he got up and he was, so adamantly raising his fist? And I mean, to have the presence of mind, right, when something like that happens was pretty remarkable.
It was pretty stunning. I mean, there was an incident in 2016 where somebody rushed the stage at one of his events. It was a much smaller event, and he was not a former president, so the Secret Service presence was not the same. And he ducked. Like it was a very different reflex. He is a showman. He is a performer. He is, on a reality show, he was an actor, essentially. He is always vividly mindful of the camera being on him and what image he's projecting. And as I said before, he doesn't like anything that conveys weakness. And then one of the things that I was very struck by was that, and I think some of this might have just been shock, but it apparently the push down from the agents knocked him out of his shoes. And he kept saying, just let me get my shoes, because I think he didn't want to be seen shuffling off stage without shoes. But it was still pretty striking to have the presence of mind to do that, given what had just happened, I've been covering politics a long time. I covered the terrorist attack on the World Trade Center. I was down in Lower Manhattan when the second one fell. I covered rebuilding at the site for 3 years. I've never seen anything like this.
Well, Maggie Haberman from the New York Times. Maggie, thank you so much. We'll all be reading what you write tomorrow. You're going to be covering the speech tonight, yes?
I am. Follow along on the Times website if you guys are interested.
Okay, great. All right, Maggie, thanks again. And everyone, thanks for watching. Talk to you soon, Maggie.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.